All right, what's up, guys? Have you ever wondered what is it like to go through the full ACL recovery, not once, but twice, and get back to basketball? Today, we have a special guest, Kadin, who recovered from ACL surgery twice and is back to playing basketball. So we're going to go over kind of all his obstacles that he overcame to get back to playing basketball. But yeah, Kadin, let's just get started. Just tell him a little bit about yourself, and then we can go from there.
All right, yeah. So, Kadin, I graduated high school about a year ago. I've torn my ACL 2 times. Both times I recovered with Marco in the basketball docks. And then recently I had gone back in December from playing basketball in Spain.
So. Nice. Awesome, man. So let's kind of go straight into it. So tell us about the first time you tore your ACL. Kind of like, I know everyone that's torn their ACL, they know exactly kind of what went down the entire day. Kind of walk me through it. Like, how'd you feel and everything?
Yeah. Okay. So the first time I tore my ACL, I was a junior in high school. It was going to be my first year on varsity. It was around September, I want to say. We had a practice after school and I was feeling really great, man. Like, I had just almost gotten like the craziest dunk ever. Like, I was feeling really good that day. And then we were doing this drill. It was called 3-on-2, 2-on-1. So it was basically you start with 3 people, they go against 2 people, and those two people come back 2-on-1. So I was one of the 3 people going up. I was running the lane down the right wing. I got the ball and I tried to Euro right to left. And as soon as I planted with my right foot, I felt my whole knee like shift out of place. I felt a little pop and I was on the floor for a minute. Yeah, so that was how the first one happened. And then the second time it happened, I was just in the gym with my homies. I was just playing like 2-on-2. I just did a little bump with my shoulder, planted with my knee. Same thing happened. Felt a little pop, and I was in. So.
Yeah, man. And then when was the second time? How many months after the first one?
So the first time, it took me about, I would say, like 8 to 9 months to fully recover. And when I heard it, I want to say I was about 11 months out because I got my original surgery in September and then I re-injured it the next July.
Yeah. And then just kind of give you guys a recap. Kadin had a different type of ACL surgery. He didn't have an ACL reconstruction the first time. He had an ACL repair. So they kind of repair the ACL, which is very rare, but it is done. But then the second time around, he got an ACL reconstruction, and they used your quad tendon, right? Or patellar,
right?
Quad, right?
Quad, yeah.
Quad. And then, so throughout that rehab, the second time, you go through the entire rehab the first time. What went through your mind the second time when you tore it?
Man, I would say the second time was definitely a lot worse than the first time. Because throughout that first rehab process, I really started to gain my confidence back, in my game and my body. And I had felt better than I had ever felt before. So to put all that work, all that hard work and time and effort in just to re-injure it, really put me in a bad spot, man. And yeah, I was pretty down bad for a while, for a while I was wondering, is this really for me? Am I just going to get injured again? I had all these different thoughts racing through my head. So it was definitely rough the second time, man. Yeah.
And then, I mean, and it goes through everyone. Even how about the first time? Did any thought in your mind go through, when you first tore it, you're like, man, can I ever play back? Or you didn't really think about it? You're like, you know what, I'm going to get back.
Yeah, I mean, at first for sure, because, I had a pretty athletic play style and I had always been pretty high jumper. So my main concern was, am I going to come back not as athletic, not as sharp as I was before? Am I still going to be able to compete at the same intensity that I was always at before that?
Okay. Yeah. And that's super common. Everyone has that, after any injury, it's the first thing is am I athletically going to be able to get back? And then throughout that rehab, and honestly, I tell people all the time, because you read And that's why we're doing podcasts like this, because you read kind of like the negatives. You're like, you know what? I was never able to jump after ACL surgery. Like my career ended. But honestly, as long as you put in the work and, do your rehab, you'll be able to continue going, continue
Oh, yeah.
playing and everything like that. What would you say was like the hardest part on some of the recovery process? Like, was there any obstacle? Like, I know a lot of people have trouble. One of them's like, the first jump is always hard. What
Right.
was the hardest part for you?
I would say the hardest part for me was probably just the beginning when you're like immobile and not able to do anything, because I really felt like I just wasn't myself at that point. Like I couldn't like let my energy out. Like I was stuck on the couch all day. And man, like that recovery at first is like really tough, bro. Like you gotta like really like go through some pain to like get yourself there. But I would say like once I got through that, maybe those first like 3 months, I was feeling good because I had gotten like my first jump in. Like we were starting to do some more like athletic stuff. So yeah, I would say definitely like the first couple, maybe like 2 to 3 months were like the roughest part for me.
Yeah. And then, and that's definitely tough because you also had a meniscus repair, right? Where you couldn't put weight on it. So it just gets your leg weaker. You really can't do anything,
Right.
much. And then once you started doing more dynamic movements, was there a specific movement or anything on the court that you're like, oh man, I feel hesitant, or kind of what were some of the hardest things to go back to?
Yeah. I would say for me, probably the hardest mechanic to get back was my cutting. In terms of jumping, I was pretty okay because that wasn't the way I injured myself. But because I injured myself doing like a lateral movement, it was really scary to put like that full force right back on my leg, for the first time. Like you really gotta like commit to it and you can't like, like you really gotta like put your all into it. So it's definitely scary, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's one of the hardest parts for ACL. It's that cutting, that lateral movement,
Yep.
pushing that leg. And especially for you, it's like a lot of people injure their, especially basketball players, a lot of them injure it through Euro step, Jamal Murray, Kawhi Leonard. I also think Jabari Parker had a Euro step injury. So it's that changing direction, all in one force and switching over to your other leg. How about the first time you did a Euro step? Was that kind of sketchy or scary?
Um, I don't know. I mean, so I think one thing that was really helpful during the rehab was you had me doing a lot of cutting from the jump because you knew that was like how I injured myself. And I think you knew that was like my biggest fear. So definitely like when we were practicing the movements at first, I was a little hesitant. Like I didn't really want to put like my full force into it yet. But I would say by the time I got back on the court, I had like zero worries about anything. Like I felt like 100% ready to go for sure by the end.
No, that's awesome. And that's one thing we try to stress is like you got to do all the movements that you're going to do on the court in the rehab or doing before, because you want to show up to the court and be like, oh, what the hell? Like, I haven't seen this, haven't done this. That's like a recipe for disaster. And I kind of want to fast forward to kind of the second time around, or I mean, we're kind of talking to, both times. When you're going through the second time around, is the rehab easier or harder? Because you technically have already done it.
Right.
One, what kind of goes through your mind? Because we talked to several people. Some people are like, you know what, the rehab was way easier because I knew what to expect. I
Yeah.
knew everything. What do you say?
Yeah. So for me, I would say physically, the second time around was probably easier for sure because I already knew what to expect. I had already gone through everything. I mean, there was a little variation here and there, but for the most part, I knew what to expect. But I would say mentally, the second time around was a lot tougher because I was so scared of re-injuring it again. Like the first time I was definitely hesitant to put 100% force into everything, but the second time around it was even worse because I was worried about re-injuring it for a third time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say physically the first one was harder. Mentally, the second one was harder.
No, for sure. And then talk to us. I mean, and that's where you kind of just, mentally, it's getting your mind and your leg working on one, getting your knee, one, not only strong, but also getting your mind to believe that your knee's strong enough to do certain of the movements. Cause you'll probably second guess it. Oh, I don't want to I don't want to push off with my right leg, or I don't want to push off my left leg because it's in,
Yeah.
So getting that mind and body connected to be kind of on par. And then walk us through kind of how it felt your first game back after the second one. Cause I mean, that's a tough one, or maybe your first time you played against someone. Like, how'd you feel? I mean, because you were overseas for a while, kind of walk us through kind of like the first game, or even like playing, or how did it feel playing your first time after your second one, like a 5-on-5, your first 5-on-5, either it was pickup or, over there overseas.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say physically, I knew I was ready. Like I wasn't worried that my body wasn't where it needed to be. But again, like mentally, it really is an obstacle to overcome, especially when, like I had played 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3 up to that point. But I hadn't played any 5-on-5 before I got out overseas. So that first game lacing up, man, I had, hella butterflies going through my stomach. Like I was wondering, am I gonna be okay? Like, am I gonna push it too much? But once I got out there, man, it was like that. It came back to me just like that, and I felt great out there, bro. Like really ready to go.
Nice, man. And then was there any time throughout that process when you're playing that you ever thought about it, or not really, after the first initial? Because you said initially you felt it, not felt it, but like you're like butterflies, right? And after that you were like, you said everything was a go. Did you ever think about it?
Yeah. On the court, never. On the court, it was never a problem to me. Like I never thought, oh, I can't do this move because I'm going to mess up. Yeah. I would say definitely like coming off the court though, your knee's going to be a lot sore. Like you could do all the strengthening in the world, like there's still going to be a difference between your two knees. So one thing I really had to learn while I was out overseas is how to take care of my body the correct way. So whatever it was, like taking an ice bath after, making sure to stretch before and after practicing games. Yeah, all that stuff, man, was really important.
Yeah, I mean, and that's super common. A lot of people say, my knee does feel a little different afterwards. During it's fine, but afterwards they'll feel something like, hey, it's not the same. But I mean, when they're performance wise, it's good. But I think that's what plays a huge role, is that recovery, that stretching, that constant thing. In regards to now, how do you feel now? Like what?
Right now, I feel great. I don't feel like there's anything I couldn't do that I couldn't do before I hurt my knee. And again, a lot of that is the recovery aspect. And I really had to learn that on my own, like that you only got one body, so you really got to take care of it. So, but yeah, man, I ain't got no worries no more. Nothing on the court, nothing.
And then, no, that's awesome, man. And it's like you said, you got to take care of your body. When you're younger, you could kind of go off, do everything. But as you're getting older, you really got to take care of it. And especially if you had an injury before. Yep. Right now at this moment, let's say you're playing, do you ever wonder, or you ever think like, man, am I going to re-tear? Do you ever have any of those thoughts going through?
I would say like in the earlier stages of coming back on the court, I definitely had some thoughts like that go through my head every now and again, just because, it wasn't the first time something like that had happened. But by this point, I think I'm confident enough in myself and my abilities and the work that I've put in that it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that's where it comes in, physically and mentally preparing you for that event. And then once you're there, you're solid. Like you said, the first time it's probably scary, but you did all the right steps to make sure you're successful in that return to basketball, which is hard. I mean, there's a stat saying only 50% of people go back to sports after an ACL. And out of those 50%, only 20 get back to competitive sports, meaning like they're playing, at another level, like you were playing overseas. So it's already a big deal. You're like 1 in 5. And I think the reason why it's so low is because people don't do the full recovery. They kind of give up, because there's a lot of times where you probably felt it. I don't know if was there a particular instance where you're like, hey, you know what? I'm over this, I don't want to go back to sport. Was there any of that thought process when you were going through the rehab?
Oh, for sure, man. I mean, after that first one, I had lost all confidence in myself, in my abilities, and I was like, oh shit, like I gotta go through what, 9 months of recovery. Like, is it even worth it at this point? And then on top of that, the second time I had hurt my knee was during the middle of COVID, right? So I didn't even know if I was going to have a high school season that year or what. So I definitely had some thoughts like that go through my head, but like I always knew deep down like basketball was like what I wanted, and it was like something really important to me. And once I started seeing results in the recovery, that's when it really like confirmed it for me that like this is what I want to do. And like I have a talent. So like I'm gonna put 100% of my effort into it and make something out of it.
That's awesome, man. I liked how you said once you see the results, because once you start seeing that you're getting better and better, it kind of motivates you to push even more and more. So that's kind of a great piece of advice already in itself. But what advice do you have people going through the ACL recovery, trying to get back to basketball? What's your advice for them?
Yeah. I would say the biggest thing is don't give up on yourself. There's going to be times when you're making a lot of progress. There's going to be times when you feel like you're not making any progress. But as long as you can keep that end point, that end goal in mind, I think you're going to be good. You got to remember what you're working towards. And as long as you chip away at it a little bit every day, I think you'll be good.
Awesome, man. I love that advice. And that's actually another question that I had. If you could do your rehab thing over, or is there something, if you would have known an entire rehab, obviously not torn your ACL, that's one of them, but what's one thing you would have done differently throughout the rehab journey?
One thing I would have done differently. The first time around, I was kind of stupid about it, and I wanted to like just like play 2-on-2 with my friends early and stuff, and like I tweaked my knee a couple times doing it. So I would say the biggest thing is just staying strict with myself on the recovery and like really not putting myself in any dangerous type of situations until I was ready for it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, and it's tough because it's a tough injury recovery. It takes a while, and you're like, I want to get back because you feel good, but the reality is it's still healing and everything. So that's the unfortunate part. But no, that's great advice there. So normally we tell people kind of like to end the podcast, like, what's your favorite basketball memory, as a basketball player or as a fan? What's one thing that you kind of cherish? You're like, man, this was sick, either watching it or experience yourself, you doing certain a thing on your basketball career. What's your favorite basketball memory?
Yeah, so I'll give you two. So I would say my favorite memory watching basketball had to be Kobe dropping 60 in his last game.
Yep.
That was probably the most like legendary thing I've ever seen. Like a 40, what was he, like 41, 42-year-old man, like going out there dropping 60 in the NBA. Like that was
It was like
insane.
championship atmosphere. Everyone was out
Yeah,
there.
man. Like I could tell he was locked in that whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one. And then I would say, like, me personally, from my experience, I would say my favorite memory I have was my first dunk after my second ACL tear, because I really like didn't have like my bounce all the way back yet, and I was still a little like skeptical on it. But I was playing a pickup game at 24-hour fitness over here. I got in the steal. I was out on the fast break, and I wasn't even thinking about it. I just went up, boomed it with one hand. I don't know, man. There's something about it was just felt like good, like satisfying. Like
Yeah. Hell yeah. And are you still dunking or what?
every now and again, man. Nothing crazy, but
Yeah.
try to get up there when I can.
Yeah. Awesome, man. No, this is solid, Kadin. I think a lot of people kind of will learn a lot about just the recovery process, the mental and physical aspect of it. Because, like you said, you're kind of like one of the few people. I mean, the stats go even lower, especially if you got your second ACL, and you gone back to your sport, you're still playing. So it's like very, not rare per se, but you're part of the few people that go back to sport, because normal people will probably be like, what, after my second ACL, it's like, hey, I'm done. Let me just get me back to walking, sitting, maybe jogging. I'm cool. But you went back to sport, you're still active, you know, so that's already an accomplishment itself. So for you to kind of see that, for people to get that perspective of like, hey, you know, you overcame that you talked about the obstacles and you overcame them, and getting back to the core, that's, I think it's pretty cool for people to kind of get the different aspect. Cause, you know, we could kind of talk about, you know, what we expect at 3 months, 6 months, but it's a little different when you're going through the recovery itself, and everyone's a little different, especially after the second one. But awesome, man. Thanks for hopping on. Yeah, man, good luck with the rest of your basketball career. And like I said, people, I like tell people all the time, it's like, as long as you put in the work, you'll get the result.
Yeah, for sure, man. Appreciate it.